a culture that wholeheartedly embraces the laid-back aesthetic, you may ask yourself, why do I need a dress watch? You are going to need to dress up at some point in time. There's going to be a dressy occasion that you have to show up to. Even if you don't generally dress formally, you are going to need to look a little bit better, a little bit more formal, right? And I do think that dress watches would be a perfect addition to such an outfit. And I do think that dress watches kind of play into the idea that it's better to be overdressed than underdressed. And of course, a major caveat with this and something to keep in mind is that you should never buy a watch based off other people's opinions. Firstly, because it's not a big part of your outfit, and second of all, and most importantly, most people don't care about what you're wearing. They don't notice it. So you should buy a watch for you. With that in mind, I still think that these general rules are applicable and useful for the average person. If you want to talk watches, if you have any disagreements, you just want to comment down below, I would definitely recommend dropping a comment because I will try to respond to each and every one of you. So the second point is versatility. Now, there's constant talk about gotta watches. Go anywhere, do anything watches. You can go to the beach with these watches. You can go swimming with these watches. You can go climb Mount Everest with these watches and also come home, eat a nice meal, and then go out with friends, right? With a suit and tie type thing. However, I do think that it makes more sense to have dedicated watches for each occasion. If you're watching this video, you probably don't own just one watch. You own more than one watch. And you probably own watches for certain occasions. And I think it makes more sense to have a dedicated beater watch to do your physical activities and then have a very nice dress watch instead of having a gotta watch that's kind of mediocre at doing everything. I do think that dress watches are a lot easier to be dressed down than sports watches or gotta watches can be dressed up. It's a lot harder to call a dive watch a dressy watch if you just pop on a leather band versus if you're walking around with a Seiko Presage in a white t-shirt and jeans. I think it just works better. For the average person, you probably aren't climbing Mount Everest one day and then diving into the sea the next. I do think that in terms of utility, the average person would wear a watch more often if it can be worn in casual, semi-formal, and formal events. Why? Because the average person's life consists of coming home, going to work, and going out with friends and family. This major marketing idea of the average watch geek being the next athletic champion is just not realistic, right? I mean, most people do some sort of physical activity, but not to that extent. So I do think that dress watches are a lot more versatile in an average person's life. So pricing. I do think that dress watches are a lot easier to do properly with less resources. So I do think that due to the simplicity of dress watches, right, you only have a few complications in a dress watch because it's supposed to be simple and less ostentatious. There is more resources to allocate to the basics, and that's very useful for affordable watches where you don't have that much money to dedicate to different parts of the watch. If you buy a $100 dress watch, the company can allocate more money to better polishing, a better movement, a better design, versus if you spend $100 on a sports watch. So for instance, something like this Pagani design, the money is spread very thinly, right? You have a GMT bezel that could go wrong, it might be misaligned, the loom could not be as strong, the water resistance might, again, not be up to par, and everything is just kind of mediocre. And this idea of simplicity also ties into another idea, which is the chances of being robbed. Now, I don't have a statistical proof that would back up this claim. However, I think intuitively it makes more sense for a robber to go after someone who has a Rolex because it's a lot more identifiable. I do think that does kind of add to one of the benefits of wearing a dress watch. And so the last point I would say is timelessness. From the beginning of the watch industry, dress watches were a thing. And I'm pretty sure in the last days of the watch industry, dress watches are also going to be a thing. There are a whole bunch of different fads, transient fads in this watch hobby that come and go, but dress watches are not one of those fads. One thing about dress watches is that they're very collectible and they make great heirlooms. They just stand the test of time. No pun intended. The last thing I want to talk about is recommendations, right? You hear about all these dress watches. Okay, time taker. I know I should get a dress watch. Now, what should I get? This recommendation list is not going to be super long because I've noticed that a lot of YouTubers talk about watches that they've never even seen as though they are experts on them. And I want to be very cautious about what I recommend. So I'm going to be recommending some that I have had time to evaluate. And the first being the Casio Tank. So the Casio Tank takes inspiration from the Cartier Tank. It's a fraction of the price, and it does look very classy. It comes very close to that design with its own spin. However, it's a quartz movement, which may be a downside for some, and the materials are not up to par. But again, it's super inexpensive. I would still recommend it. I'll have it linked in the description as an affiliate link. A light recommendation with a very big caveat, and that is the Sanda Tank. So what are the things I appreciate about it? Well, it's extremely inexpensive. It was like $12, and it has a classic look to it, and it's very versatile. It's the watch that got me into dress watches. But this major caveat is that it essentially steals the Cartier Tank Must design because it doesn't add its own spin on it. But I am very aware that some people don't care about that, so I'm just putting this in here to cater toward that audience. If you want to check out this Sanda Tank and my full review on it, my in-depth thoughts, I would most definitely recommend checking out my State of the Collection video that I'll have linked in the description below and in this iCard up here. The next watch that I would recommend, the last one I've had time to evaluate, is this Namoki watch. The reason I recommend this is because personally I have been always intrigued by the Grand Seiko lineup and their kind of design, and I do think that NamokiMods offers a very affordable alternative to those while also having its own charm because you get to build this watch. Of course, there are a whole bunch of struggles I went through building this watch, but I do think that it has its own spin on the Grand Seiko look while also accruing a whole bunch of compliments. I mean, out of all of the watches I own, I can say honestly that this watch has been the most enjoyed by a whole bunch of different people, and they've made it very clear to me that they like the watch. So if you want to check out my struggles with building this watch and just my general thoughts, I would definitely recommend checking out my review and just process of building this watch. I'll have linked in the iCard and description down below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope this channel patinas like your favorite watch, and I hope to see you in another episode of the Time Ticker.